Hi to everyone. This is V. Srinivas Rao, also known as VSR. I am the chairman for Smart Cities Working Group under IET, Institution of Engineering and Technology Future Tech Panel. So today we are going to talk about a very interesting subject called software-defined smart cities powered by blockchain technologies. So blockchain, I think that's where I think everybody is talking today. It's a hot topic. So our intention today is to discuss with my friend Jay, who is the CTO of Kernel Tech, very much known for artificial intelligence, machine learning solutions. And he also worked extensively in the banking and finance segment for last 18 years with Dash Bank, UBS, RBS, and Society General type of branch. He actively participate in so many other initiatives uh, blockchain standards development under BIS and ISO and other related initiatives. Thanks, Jay, for joining this very important session today. I would like
Thank you,
to
Visa.
start the session by asking you what and why this blockchain in general before we get into the application of the same city problems. So, what is this blockchain? What is that distributed ledger technology? And why blockchain is pretty prominent today?
Thank you, VSR. It's always a pleasure talking to you. So, at least in emerging technology space, there are specific inflection points that happen time and again. And one such inflection point has been the introduction of blockchain and distributed ledgers. Now, this has been a fundamental reimagination of how digital data can be harnessed and how trust becomes the foundation on which many other aspects can be built. In 2009, when Satoshi Nakamoto published his white paper, not many people paid attention to it or figured out what it was. And when it did come to the limelight, people just looked at what the cryptocurrency elements were about Bitcoin and not really what was powering Bitcoin to happen. Now, what Satoshi was trying to solve, and which is the crux of what a blockchain really solves, was he tried to look at how a system can work in a decentralized manner by keeping trust as the basis. That's the essence of what it is. And when you relook at it, then Bitcoin just becomes one application of blockchain based system. And that is the crux that we are looking at replicating across a plethora of use cases where disintermediation is key. Blockchain plays a fundamental role in happening that, in doing that. PSR.
So, in a common person language, can I say that blockchain basically eliminates the middle entities or institutions because you talk about trust. So you
Yeah.
have banks to establish trust between the probably sender and the receiver, okay, or
Mhm.
the government agencies. If anybody wants to register a land, then there is a trust
Mhm.
established by government testing,
Yeah.
certifying that this land is valid, it is legal. That means
Yeah.
somebody in the
Yeah.
middle is established that trust. So, can I
Yeah.
summarize and say that, my dear blockchain, if you basically become a part and parcel of our day-to-day life, these middle institutions, whether government agencies, whether banks, or tomorrow the auditors, for example, all these are
Mhm.
just establishing the trust between the two agencies, right? Government and an individual, we are appointing an auditor to make sure they stand certifying and making sure that this data can be trusted. So, in summary, can I say that in the common people language, blocking, without the middle entities who have been now supporting and bringing the trust,
Mhm.
slightly, slowly, I think, I would say eliminate,
Mhm.
reduce the, I think, intervention and make sure the
Yeah.
transactions can be completed. Is that right assumption?
Definitely. Because what I think blockchain leverages on are elements that were primarily built for a very different purpose, like military and other applications, and very smartly combines these separate things which have its own trajectories into making something a lot more useful. I mean, you should look at blockchain as an
Hmm.
amazing recipe that has been created with core ingredients that were built for very different purposes. Now, you have cryptography, which is primarily used for encrypting information. You have digital signatures, which can become a replica for your physical signatures that were required. And then you are looking at distributed consensus, where a system can be moved across different entities. And when you combine these three powerful ingredients, what you end up getting is an amazing recipe for something that is going to fundamentally re-alter the way what we are looking at. And precisely as you pointed out,
Sure.
banking is required by all. Banks itself are agents which facilitate banking. Now, this is the definition we need to understand, because you, at the end of the day, would subscribe to banking as a service. And when this becomes so democratized, then the entity that is serving it is just one of them. It opens you to a whole new world. And so you're right that it would disintermediate at many levels at across
Okay.
plethora of services. Yes, sir.
So can I say that when we basically bring this to city administration, so we can expect some of the existing roles can be removed. Of course, they can be utilized for other better services, because wherever
Mhm.
you think this trust to be established, we basically appointed so many government officers. So those roles can be,
Mhm.
I think, eliminated, and then blockchain can do itself. Today, anyhow, we are not going
Mhm.
getting into too much of details about the blockchain, but the essence of the blockchain here, what you I think rightly said, one is establishing the trust without depending on the human beings, and then
Mhm.
the second one is that I think the digital signatures, right? I think without human being
Yeah.
means there should be something should be
Mhm.
signed document. If I am an
Mhm.
individual, then I sign it with a pen, but without pen, I should sign it, right? That
Mhm.
means that is a digital signature. All will be there. Okay, good.
Mhm.
So with that note, I request you to talk about what are all the challenges today, especially the Indian cities or in general,
Mhm.
the problems that have been cities have been facing today. Cities means the citizens, and there are different
Mhm.
stakeholders are there: the investors, the business people.
Mhm.
So many I think scenarios we can really address. So before we
Mhm.
talk about how blockchain resolve these problems, can you
Mhm.
summarize your understanding and comprehension of what all the city problems are there today, which are alarming, which can be solved with blockchain? So any case studies or
Mhm.
use cases you can share from your experience?
Definitely, VSR. So what we are seeing as a city is a living, thriving organization, right? As a city, we start identifying ourselves to a city. There are host of things that a city invariably has to do. Now, cities can take any type of stance they want on how they want to be more business friendly, or do they want to be known for some of their artifacts. So specifically at a city level, what you're looking at is a huge number of population which is going to be floating, a huge number of challenges that the city grapples with. So primarily, if you look at infrastructure itself, I mean, there are going to be multiple requirements of a city. I mean, it could be from roadways, it could be into the treatment, into the water related facilities. There's a whole lot of data that is generated from all these systems, but there is no one central way for you to easily assess whether the data that is coming in is truthful and whether the data can be trusted. And only when you have trustworthy data would you be able to take more decisions in the larger interest of what the city really requires. And today, this is a big vacuum that ends up creating. Yes, we do have command centers where this information does come in, but can we really trust the data that is coming in if it is not credibly built in? So, one is on the infrastructure itself, what is there for you to get one sort of information snapshot. That is one big challenge what we see. Second, once this data comes to you, and let's say you are taking some decisions based on this data, now there should be a lot of impetus put on good quality data that is coming in, which can be traced back with a good provenance. This is again a second area where we do not have that sort of tight control on where it is coming and how it is getting rendered. Three, you're looking at security and information for the citizenry who are around, whether it could be policing, whether it could be any of the other decision making you want to do. You need to be in a position to drive information based on additional data that can be gathered, which is ad hoc. It's not just static feeds that are there. You need to be able to get that. Now, that's another area where we are looking at a massive amount of information. Next, living, thriving cities will have health indicators, like whether it's pollution levels, whether it is the water quality levels. You need to be able to assess that, and that sort of information needs to come in. Now, we can go on with other wellness factors on how fit a citizenry is, how are they able to come in. It could be paperwork regarding taxation and other aspects that are coming in. It could be certificates that they're requesting for, depending on what the use case is. Now, these seven different acts is what I've given. If you combine all of them, you're looking at a gargantuan set of tasks that are expected out of city administration officials. Now, this is not going to be possible unless it is suitably augmented with different technology stacks. One of them is blockchain, which can establish the veracity of the data that is coming in from various sources. So that's my, I would say, a very quick
Okay.
assessment on today's scenario.
So my fundamental question, I'm sure you know, we worked with one of the state governments where there was something like a dashboard, maybe some
Yeah.
60 circles. Okay, but I was surprised how a single person can see 60 circles and grasp it, which is very difficult. But surprisingly, okay,
Yeah.
whether this is a 60 parameters you are reviewing and all, but most of the times the complaint is, as you rightly said, the data is not correct.
Mhm.
Whatever the representation given on that dashboard is not really reflecting the true situation at the field in the city or in the state, whatever.
Mhm.
But when human
Mhm.
beings are
Mhm.
entering the data, okay, when human
Mhm.
beings entering the data, when intentionally somebody entering the wrong data, how it is possible
Mhm.
for us to correct that? It is impossible for us, right? I mean, if the human intention is
Yeah.
not good, and if it is, for
Yeah.
example, you let us the COVID-19, if the number of cases are X, but you are giving 0.5X, but how
Mhm.
that problem can be solved using blockchain? I mean, we are talking about very important provenance and then the origin, right? The origin. And then
Mhm.
second is
Mhm.
the correctness. Okay, if I know the origin and the correctness is very difficult, the origin might be known, right? So
Mhm.
how I think we can address such type of an issue? So without using, because nowadays I'm telling I rely probably machines more
Mhm.
than the people.
Mhm.
Maybe
Yeah.
IoT can give the right data, rather a human being entering the data.
Indeed, VSR, and this is again a very pertinent point that you have raised. I mean, one of the states in North India we worked with, because as a part of Curltech, we have our own drone operations, and where we have beyond visual line of sight that we could have our drones fly and estimate, vegetation. We could estimate many of those aspects. In one of the areas in the north, when we were working with this particular state, what we recognized was there was a certain amount of roads that were supposed to be laid, and when the drone flew over and came back, we were seeing only 70% of the road even existed. That 30% did not even exist. So we
Okay.
now have people who are actually quoting that roads were laid and its potholes were fixed, and there is no road in that space. And this is exactly where, if you have to remove these uh, inefficiencies that have crept in, if you have an IoT driven device which is directly
Right.
communicating to the data source, and that information is powered and protected by a blockchain, there is no tampering that could have been created within these ecosystems,
So
right? So this is the
that
sort
means,
of
yeah, that means what is most important thing is, okay, the data is coming and so that blockchain can be used. No, from where
yeah
the data is coming, who is
yeah
sending that data. So that's where I
yeah
said, I've been telling people may not like me. I
Mhm.
I believe the machines today, okay, which sends the data
Mhm.
through whatever sensors and other devices, than the human being who has always some sort of an interest, not all, but most of
Mhm.
the cases, so that the data, whatever is
yeah
coming, is not reliable, right? So the first thing I think
yeah
blockchain must be integrated with the Internet of Things, whether it is IoT,
yeah
whether drone technologies or whatever it is, so that I think the data is coming from the
Mhm.
machines with properly calibrated sensors and all. That's first thing. Okay. The second
yeah
important thing I think you talk about, it is not possible to tamper. Okay, let us take a situation. Again, in the city or some of the places we have seen, some of the people with the influence tampered the data about the lands.
Mhm.
Okay, so that means they changed the provenance. I mean, the link documents are changed because the system
Mhm.
administrator has the access to the database in the
yeah
system. One guy, right, the super admin, one guy, he can go
Mhm.
back end, he
Mhm.
will go and change the things and then commit it into the database, whatever it is, right? So everybody is saying in blockchain it is not possible. It is not like one guy can really change it. So give me a situation where I want to minimize in the city these sort of malpractices where one guy has the complete power over the database, where he can change anything from the back end by breaking all the
Yeah.
rules. So how blockchain will solve that, and how it can bring the trust?
Okay, this is again a phenomenal question, VSR. It shows the depth of, you worked across various pertinent problems, so you know exactly what is the crux of the issue. What we are seeing here is we're not saying that blockchain is this magic, elixir that will solve all the problems. But what it does is it is resistant to tampering. So if you see the three crux, what I mentioned about blockchain, one is the crypto-based cryptography that is extensively used, digital signatures, which are again significantly important, and the third aspect is the consensus that is over a distributed set of systems. So once something is cryptographically protected, then it is mathematically linked. It's not a person linking it, it is linked mathematically. A digital signature is an equivalence that once something has been committed to this, you can't come back and say, I never did it, because it's your responsibility to ensure what went into that system. And third, this is not going to reside in one system. It is going to be distributed across a larger network. Now, and the beauty of blockchain is also a data structure. So every time information is stored, it's stored with something called a hashing, which is a mathematical way of scrambling data and storing in the system. Every time new data gets generated, the next data set, the node that gets created, has a reference to what got created in the past. So in a way, everything is bound together in a chain of blocks, and that is why it is called a blockchain. Now, let's take the case and point of view mentioning what if someone deliberately tried to tamper. Now, if they had to tamper, they would have to do it from the very beginning, from where the grandfather deed document was itself put into the system. Once that has been put in and typecast, it is now going to have a complete reference to what really went in the first place. Now, if someone decides to manipulate it here, he not only needs to manipulate it here, he needs to manipulate the previous block as well. Now, if you manipulate the previous block, then you have to do the previous block because the reference to the previous block is here. So that way you will continue to go all the way to the source. And the moment you're touching the source system, then everyone's going to be alerting that someone's playing something funny with this entire system because this is not how it's designed to. So by design of the system itself, it is resistant to tampering, right? It requires a whole lot of people to collude together. And the aim of how we will design the system is to not keep that control with one entity. It would be distributed with makers and checkers in place to prevent exactly problems like this, VSR. From happening.
Sure. So, in the interest of the time, probably can we quickly summarize the use cases? We talk about the land registration just now.
Yeah.
So how that and like that. One or two examples can you give in the healthcare, in the city administration or governance, in the city perspective? What are all the use cases in the blockchain area?
So, at a governance level, I mean, if you had to sector in, we're looking at security, which is more on the cameras, all cameras, dashboards that are coming in. There is veracity of that being maintained, tracked, and managed. We're looking at city services. I mean, it could be certificates issuance. It could be it could be completely done in a digital manner. Three, any incursions in land or any of that comes within the purview of the city administration can be tracked, figured out, and sufficient penalties can be levied to deter such activities happening. Health indicators, where pollution in a particular region or where industry is the grade of coming in, we could have IoT data directly feeding into a governance related dashboard, so quick responses can be happening. Situations like the pandemic, right, on COVID-19, I mean, the city is actively looking at identifying who's coming into the city, where are they staying, how are they moving out, when have they been in quarantine or not, have they breached it. All this is going to be significantly difficult for a city to do it with just human people. Now, data driven approaches can go, really a long way. So this is, I would say, 4 or 5 in the interest of time, the high level use cases we can look at.
I think you remember one of the state governments was looking for saving the DNA of the human being in blockchain. So it was in Andhra Pradesh when Mr. Naidu was the chief minister. They were trying to put the human DNA in the blockchain. That means DNA is very dangerous, right? You cannot tamper with the data.
Yeah.
Okay, if I put it in one database and somebody has a super access, then I can tamper with that DNA. Then whatever the medication you get it, I think you will be in a dangerous situation. With the same DNA
Mhm.
of X VXR is put it in 10 nodes or 10
Mhm.
areas or 10 databases, for example. Then
Mhm.
tampering 10 databases might be very challenging, which is not easy, right? I think you
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
make
yeah.
sure that all the 10 have to be done. And it have to, again, a lot of nexus is required if you want to tamper 10. If it is one, probably it is in our country. I think that is the whole
Exactly.
essence of, I think, blockchain, right? So good. I
Exactly.
think, again, the land records, we don't want anybody to tamper. Now we have seen so many cases where it is one database, then people can tamper. No, now it is so many, one
Mhm.
land record is available on 10 databases and you can't change
Yeah.
it. If you want to change, you have to change all the 10 databases and all. In simpler terms, of course.
Exactly.
It's a very
Yeah.
complex technology. It took a lot of time even for me to understand it. So, okay, all
Mhm.
right. So the healthcare you talk about, and you talk about, in fact, very important thing, the drone-related surveillance, where the data
Mhm.
captured, whether road is there or not. I mean, you cannot really cheat, right? The contractor cannot
Yeah.
say that I have to, because the data is captured from the drone, and that data is again
Yeah.
stored in multiple databases where you cannot tamper with that data, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
I think this is an excellent, I think, topic. So now let us conclude with a few more questions. Like, okay, we talk about why blockchain, what is blockchain, and also some of the use cases to establish the trust and to avoid tampering the data because it is mathematically driven. Human interventions are minimized. Then, what changes we need to bring in the city administration? Because in the city administration means again it is government. So the government
Mhm.
operates in a very different model, right? So they
Mhm.
have their own policies they have to adhere with, and very strict rules will be there. So now, how these smart contracts, which we are talking about, will change the whole governance in the what is a smart contract and how it will impact the whole governance in the city.
Smart contracts is basically an application of programmable code that can be put in with exactly the same three aspects I mentioned, which is cryptography driven, digital signatures, and distributed consensus. When a code can be put in such a way, then easily you can activate things that were not possible prior to this. Now, the ultimate use case of a smart contract is something called D8O, which is decentralized autonomous organizations. What that means is, let's look at a city, for example. There are taxes to be collected on some premises that need to be utilized. Now, these tax documents are all completely digital. The data is coming to a tax. You have someone in the middle who is looking at these documents, verifying whether it is accurate, and then issuing what needs to be done. Now, many of these systems are laden with multiple touch points, and it only introduces more frustration for the end customer and not the kind of quality that they get. But if a data driven approach is implemented, where data comes in and based on a certain set of rules, some actions need to take place, then the whole thing can happen very, very seamlessly. And when you look at it from a governance standpoint, when you break down the problem into 50 different clusters, each of them, when a data comes in and matches these conditions, then these things should happen. We can codify them and have them kept open and transparent. So you know for a fact that when your taxes are paid, you will issue that certificates. If you know when your taxes are paid, you will get that ITR returns that say, okay, yes, I do see it's all reconciled. You don't need a person looking at verifying it because the data is coming in, data is going out. So I think then smart contracts can be issued even for tender management. It could be issued
Right.
for a whole lot of use cases where people are frustrated that they're not able to get transparent information. Once you furnish all of it, you can get a definitive outcome. Smart contracts can eliminate many of these inefficiencies in the system BSR. So that's
Sure. I
how I
think
would
the
say.
government mainly go on the policies and procedures. They
Yeah.
have to strictly. If I understand right, what you're saying is if the policy, what is written in the text,
Yeah.
will become a software code now.
Yeah.
Policy is nothing but a rule.
Mm-hmm.
Government usually does in the past, probably even now. I think most of the places we have
Mm-hmm.
seen, even there are so many digitalization activities are done, but still there is a big file, and in that
Mm-hmm.
big file the officer will see and see that this is not as per the policy, sorry, I am rejecting it, this is okay. And all these things can be avoided, right? With the smart contract,
Correct.
the policies are automated, the text is translated to a software code. Whenever a
Yeah.
transaction performed in a system, then the system verify whether the transaction is done as per the clause number
Yeah.
2.1 or policy number 5.0. There is
Exactly.
no human intervention required. So the clauses,
Exactly.
the legal terms, the legal agreements, the policies becoming a clever code software. And the software is performed on behalf of the officers. All the verifications, right?
Exactly.
I think that
Exactly.
is the power. I think so. Do you expect going forward in the next 10 years? Can we assume that 50% of the government workforce can be best utilized somewhere rather for day-to-day administrative tasks? Which software, the
Exactly.
smart contracts, blockchain, and IoT can do?
Exactly. We would need to have exactly governance basically to do this. For example, when everything is done, we need to have a maker and checker to ensure that things are not somewhere cooked up. But that said, majority of them can be deployed not for these specific activities that require intervention where there is no value addition that we're doing, but primarily looking at data and lining it up because we believe that we cannot trust the person that's coming in. But what blockchain is making you think is when you integrate blockchain with allied technologies like machine learning, IoT, and other cybersecurity related ones, what you can now create is you can create the data in bulk. You would have a nice like IoT where data is created at bulk. You have machine learning which can diagnose frauds and the activities that have happened. When you look at cybersecurity to bring that information securely and put it onto a blockchain which makes it tamper resistant, you now have the real trust that is built from source all the way to the destination and nothing in between can be tampered with. That is the future where what we are looking at, VSR.
Yeah,
And in 10
imagine
years
a
I hope.
situation. Imagine a situation. You go to any government office.
Mhm.
Even old guys, the 78 years come, sit there, try to get the whatever XYZ permissions and all. It is just to see that the officer verify whether it is as per the policy and they give
Yeah.
a go ahead. Sometimes they take a year, two, three, four. And why
Yeah.
you need to take that much time if the blockchain smart contract can done in few seconds, where the
Yeah.
certificate or something will come to our home and doorstep, right? I think there is
Yeah.
a sea change will come in governance. Anyhow, I think within
Mhm.
20, 30 minutes we cannot talk everything.
Yeah.
So to summarize,
Yeah.
Jay, I think I think you come out, you gave really good examples of what is blockchain, why the blockchain is required, what sort of use cases are there in the city administration, and how we can establish trust, how the policies can be automated using smart contracts, how the provenance, that means the origination of data, can be done. It's not only blockchain, you need to integrate with IoT to make sure that the veracity of data is there, and not just depending on the human beings and all, right? So, and also we talk about the city administration perspective. If the blockchain become a part and parcel of their life, most of the officers can really focus on high-end work, and rudimentary
Mhm.
repetitive tasks can be done by this blockchain and other technologies. So thank you
Correct.
so much, Jay.
So thanks a lot for inviting me as a part of this panel. And